Birds beneath my window, dusty in their wings upon the lawn.
Hey gang, it's been a couple of months since last we spoke. In the last video, after a couple of months of planning and finally executing, I had more or less finished the Herreshoff style shear strakes, where in lieu of a specific rub rail, basically it's contoured to incorporate the rub rail right into the shear strake. And so I was pretty pleased about that. And then, as often happens during the winter, things came screeching to a halt. The next steps were steaming and fastening the shear clamps. And then I got a bee in my bonnet about the lead ballast keel. I started cutting the centerboard trunk, bought some marine plywood, and cut it out to shape, rounded the edges. And one of the key things is cutting out the little square, cutting out the void where the lead goes. That is the weight that makes it drop. This is shaped here so that it will hopefully hold in place. This is just a like a baking sheet, the underside, and I've got it clamped and it's resting on something. And so that, I think, will basically hold tight, or as tight as it needs to be, again, so it doesn't leak out. And then I have plywood underneath. This was my first experience with lead, and I was a little bit unprepared, a little bit sloppy. I was glad that I did not jump right into working with large amounts of lead for the keel. John, who's been super helpful all along the way, lent me his gantry, and so I was like, okay, great. If I'm going to have all of this done by the time he needs it back, this is what's got to happen. So I've been kind of working on two separate lines, the shear clamps and deck structure on the one hand, and then on the lead ballast keel. And in this video, I'll talk to you about the lead ballast keel. So first I got very excited and I was like, all right, let's do this. My son Henry, who has jumped in on a couple of different occasions to help out, organized the backyard and brought all of the lead that I've been accumulating for the last 6 months down to the site. And then I was like, okay, I think this can happen. So we set up the site and I started melting the raw lead. And I'd gotten stuff from scrappers and so forth. So basically it needed to be separated out.
All right, here we go. We started the fire for melting the lead. And so I've got a pretty clear afternoon for this. And so I think basically I just got to keep this guy fed. We've lined up the target for the pipe. So I've got to add a little backsplash. I've got to put in the vent pipes here in the mold. And I think it's basically just managing and playing the waiting game. Almost there. Almost there.
So that was a kind of a long process. I had a couple of fits and starts because I spent one day just melting things. Last fall, I had made the mold according to the plans, and that was a little bit technical, but fairly manageable. It actually involved some geometry. So I had built the mold out of pine boards according to the plans, and that was more or less in place. I spent a day melting, and then I had to stop. Basically, it was on a weekday, and I had to go kind of like douse the fire and go pick up my kids and take them to their after-school activities, and so it didn't work.
Gang, tough day. 4 hours working to melt the lead, and felt like I was so close. Basically, I got all the lead in, and it was just at the last minute. I hadn't budgeted enough time. I budgeted 3 hours.
Came back the next day, and I was basically ready to pour. I had a bigger fire. Everything was melted. I had a torch to basically get the pipe clear. It still wasn't enough. There was a second fail, back-to-back failure. It was kind of a bummer because getting the pot of lead melted is straightforward. It's a little bit of a challenge, but it's straightforward. Getting it to go down the pipe is a little bit more of a challenge because you not only need a torch, I really think you need 2 torches to get the metal pipe hot enough so that it doesn't cool the lead as it flows down. So a little bit splashed out, and then it cooled and it froze up, and I was like, great. Nice job, Windling. And so I was a little bit disheartened. And then a huge ice storm hit that basically put us out of commission, no outdoor activities for a month. And the ice storm was such that, in fact, when I wanted to go out and check on the boat, I was unable because the entire backyard, which slopes down, was a sheet of ice. In fact, I slipped, and then I just slowly slid down to the back of the yard, and there was nothing to grab onto. So after a month, I talked with Jeff Morrill. He agreed to come down really helpfully. And so my other son and Jeff, as well as another local boat builder, Will, all pitched in for the pour.
Hi, I'm Jeff Morrill. I met Dale through our mutual experiences on building a haven.
Hi, I'm Will Cesari. I had a little bit of experience building a canoe first, and then I built a dory after that. I'm here today to help with the getting ready of the lead to pour in the ballast keel, and basically we had a fire that was elevated to get right under the pipe, and I used the blowtorch to get everything heated up, so that was a lot of fun.
And what else is special about this day?
My birthday. Turned 43 today.
Happy birthday!
Okay, it's dripping.
Someone grab one of these from me. There we go, there we go. There we go.
Okay, it's dripping.
Grab one of these from me. There we go, there we go. There it goes. All right.
I gotta say, that was a complete success except for one thing. I had not quite fastened the kind of lid where the vents are. There's one spot on the mold where I had fastened the bottom quite well on the advice of several people. Over fastened it almost, right? Like, there are a lot of screws in there. But there's one kind of cap, and I had only put in maybe 3 or 4 screws on a side, and I really should have had, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 screws on the side, maybe every 2 or 3 inches or something along those lines, because the mold leaked.
Well, here's the first reveal of the lead keel. All right, gang. I'm happy to say I've got a keel.
Another reason for the delay was that it was spring break, and my wife and I took a trip to South Africa. She had always wanted to go on safari, And we stopped in Cape Town. And of course, you know that Cape Town is renowned as the kind of settlement right at the southern tip of Africa, in South Africa, just by Cape Point and the Cape of Good Hope, right? Like, if you can make it around the Cape of Good Hope, then you have crossed from either the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean or the Indian to the Atlantic. Cape Town was founded as a sort of supply depot for global shipping. If you make it around the Cape of Good Hope, that's a major achievement as a mariner. I was not prepared for how beautiful and compelling the place was. On one day in Cape Town, we went up to Table Mountain, which is basically a large kind of like outcropping. It's almost as if the Grand Canyon were placed above a major city on the kind of meeting point of two oceans. And so there's a national park there. And it was so beautiful. I mean, one of the most kind of visually and I think historically compelling places that I've ever been to in my life. And so you could see kind of like the Indian Ocean. There was a large bay, and beyond that basically is the Indian Ocean in one direction. In the other direction, walking just 50 meters, 100 meters, you could see the Atlantic Ocean. If you looked in another direction, you could see down at Cape Town. And in fact, Cape Town sits on a bay, Table Bay, in which there is an island, which had been an island prison, almost like South Africa's version of Alcatraz, Robben's Island. This was where Nelson Mandela was confined for about 2/3 of his years of imprisonment. And in fact, like, he could sometimes go out in the open air of the island, and he could see Cape Town, he could see Table Mountain, he could see like freedom 400 meters away. Like, it was a very compelling sight and visit that I'd recommend for anyone. As a result, I thought, maybe it's time to do the transatlantic that I've been dreaming of. I basically had two plans that I came up with once I learned to sail. One was to build my own boat, and the other was to take a transatlantic voyage. I registered for the Clipper race, and in fact, I'll be doing a transatlantic voyage from the US to Scotland in the summer of 2028, at the end of the next round of the Clipper race. So there'll be two years to prepare, but I'm going to start my sail training for that now. I thought it was time to take the next step in my own development as a mariner. So that trip to South Africa was also great for the animals that we saw and the experience my wife and I had together. While it waylaid the specific construction a little bit, it was part of a kind of broader pattern of development. And so, right, maybe it set the schedule back a week or two in building the boat, but it was actually part of a broader set of progressions in my development as a mariner. Once I had the keel poured, then it was a matter of kind of trimming it up, getting it out of the mold, getting it lifted, and this is what I had the gantry for from John. And so it was no small feat to get this up onto the construction platform. I had planned the location of the pour and the mold in order to facilitate one lift, getting it up out of the little trench that I'd dug, and then onto the construction platform with the right placement, with the right location of the gantry, then it was possible. So I had done enough forethought in that regard. So I got it up there, had some rollers. In fact, the stainless steel pipes or galvanized steel pipes that I used as the vents, I had several more of those, and basically 5 or 6 could use it to roll on the construction platform to get it into position. So I was happy about that. That took some doing. The most challenging part was getting the wood kind of blank out of what would become the centerboard slot. That wood was really stuck in there. I had to drill it at least a dozen times. I had to run a circular saw through it. I had to chisel it. It was stuck in there real tight. That was actually probably the most difficult part.
Here we are in the midst of kind of testing out the gantry, which I'm going to try and do independently. John, who lent it to me, kind of handled things last time. It seems like it's pretty simple in terms of operation, so I feel confident about that.
Also trimmed it up, faired it up, and fortunately got it into position, lifted the boat up, and set the boat down on it, and it's almost in the right position to drill the keel bolt holes.
The boat is more or less resting on its ballast keel. So that's great. The ballast keel curve does not exactly conform to the curve of the boat. That is not that much of a crisis, but basically now I've got to try to match the curve or figure out if I need to grind the lead keel a little bit and where, and also like any kind of adjustments. And it's a little bit of a challenging situation with the gantry and slings. So while I'm considering this, basically it's cleanup day here in the boatyard.
I won't be doing that quite yet. I'll need a little more help. I'm going to focus on some of the other work that I've been doing. For example, priming the inside, working on the deck structure, and so forth, until I've got a little bit of help here. And funny story, this would not be a boat building project on YouTube unless there were a cranky neighbor who was upset with the construction process. I actually talked to my neighbor about some help logistically, and they were not pleased, have not liked looking at the boat, have not liked hearing a construction process, don't like the sound of saws, and so that's made things a little more uncomfortable. Like, we're about 1 year from launch, and that schedule remains. And now, short of like death, dismemberment, or life-threatening illness for me or the people that I care about most, like, this is happening. And so we've got such momentum, and the fact that I've got my book manuscript submitted means I can really focus on this project for the next several months or year until launch.
Hello, blackbird. Hello, starling. Winter's over. Be my darling. Long time coming, but now the snow is gone. A long